Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to my channel. I am Monet and you're watching Life is Monet. One of my soft focuses for this year in terms of my channel was to return to uploading regular wrap-ups, but that did not go according to plan. But I still am attempting and trying to give you guys regular updates, regular wrap-ups. There's just something about filming wrap-ups nowadays that just doesn't really work for me. It feels exhausting mentally, but once I start filming it, everything goes well. But it feels like the lead up to the gym, where you're convincing yourself to get off of your couch, to get out of your bed, to put on gym clothes and to drive to the gym, and all of that just feels so monumentous. But then you do it and you get to the gym and your workout is like fine. It's even some of the best that you've ever had. Like, you excel your expectations. But yeah, right now that is my experience with filming wrap-ups, is that when I do them, I actually really love talking to you guys about the books that I recently read. It's just the idea of having to compress everything that I felt about a book into a couple of sentences just feels like I don't know if I have the capacity to do that. Either way, I'm here and you're here, and we're going to talk about some books that I recently read. As some of you might be aware, I launched my Patreon for my channel back in April, and it's been a journey so far. And what I did last month for the month of May is actually create a TBR bingo for my Patreons, which was so fun, and I decided to participate myself. And so to hit the bingo on my TBR bingo, I ended up reading these 3 books that we're going to talk about. The first is Hat Atelier. I grabbed this when I went to Barnes & Noble's for the first time out here in my new location, my new state, and there's just something about this book that just seemed so fun, and I have to say that I loved it. This might be my current favorite manga. Not that I have this really long list of mangas that I've read, but I love this book so much that I immediately went back to the store and grabbed the next like 4 volumes, because yeah, these are definitely, like, I don't want to say they're like my comfort read, but they are my happy place. Like, this is beyond a comfort read. This isn't something that I would pick up just because I want to be like relaxed. I want to be happy, I want to be interested, and I want to feel like lighthearted and hopeful and inspired, and I feel like that is what Hat Atelier gives me. Let me tell you what the book is about, because I feel like I'm going on, but we are essentially following this younger female character that is really enraptured with the idea of witches and how they do magic, and she just really wants to be a witch. But her hopes are pretty much let down when her mom informs her that you have to be born a witch, but you can't necessarily just become a witch. And so while she gives up the idea of herself ever being a witch one day, she is still just very fascinated with them. One day, a witch actually shows up in her mom's shop, and she sneaks and watches him perform magic, which she's absolutely not supposed to do, because the methods of magic is a secret to all. But when she sees what he's doing, she attempts to mimic him, and her magic goes dangerously awry. And now she's in this position where she actually needs the witch's help to guide her and help her fix this cataclysmic situation that she's gotten herself into. I loved everything about this book, as you can tell from me going and buying the other copies, so I cannot wait to finish all the volumes of Hat Atelier. The next book that I grabbed was The Poet X. This is a TBR veteran, and this was the only Acevedo book that I have not read to date, and leading up to her first adult release, I finally picked up the most beloved book by her, and now I understand why. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. It spoke to an unhealed, broken younger part of me, and it was just so consoling in so many ways. Nevermore is a young Hispanic girl that really feels silenced and unheard in every aspect of her life, and she's getting to the point where she is frustrated and she wants to be heard and she wants to speak out loud and live in her truth, but she's growing up in a deeply religious home, and she's afraid of the backlash from her mother. She's also going through a lot with her body. She's developing a shape that is attracting eyes of men that are even twice her age, and she's battling this war of being raised Christian and being told that she needs to be unseen and to be pious and chaste, but also being idolized and sexualized by so many members of her community. And so it's creating this battle in how she sees herself and how she sees her body, and how she's going to come to own her own sexuality. And I can't recommend this enough. Like, these two books, Hat Atelier and The Poet X, was my best like reading experience for the month for sure, because I just did not expect to love these books as much as I did, and now I'm completely looking forward to Elizabeth Acevedo's release. I believe it's coming out this month, and it is called Family Lore, and I'm so stoked. The last book that I picked up in that vlog for my Patreons was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Ironically, I thought that I had already read this book, but I guess I did not, because it wasn't marked on read on anything. But I have read Recursion and Upgrade, and I have to say that this is his best work, just because it has this like suspenseful thriller aspect. We're following Jason, who has a seemingly normal life. He's a professor, his wife is a retired artist, and they're just focusing on raising their son. But one night on the way home from a bar after having drinks with a friend, he is taken captive and hostage into this very weird situation where he cannot figure out what this person really wants from him, and then sometime throughout the night he's hit over the head, and when he wakes up, his life is not his life, his wife isn't his wife, his son isn't his son, his career is completely different, his apartment and his house, everything about him is so different, and he is stuck in this mental war of like trying to figure out what changed about his life and how that night contributed to his current situation. This is definitely Blake Crouch's best book. I have to say that personally I liked Recursion a little more, but I feel like this is more palatable. This is more recommendable. So this is the book that, like, if you're starting with Blake Crouch, or just not even Blake Crouch, like if you're trying to pick up a sci-fi thriller, I say read Dark Matter. But my personal favorite is Recursion. So if you're into that kind of stuff, I say pick it up. Recursion and the 22 Murders of Madison May, like, they deserve more hype. Actually, I'm going to make a video on books that deserve more hype, and I'm going to put those two in there. That's how much I believe in them. There was one part of my TBR from April that spilled over into May that I had to finish, and that was the rest of the Red Sister trilogy by Mark Lawrence. It's no secret that I did not have a deep fondness for book one. I feel like we spent a lot of time wasting time and meandering through the story, and that continued on throughout the rest of the series. I just feel like the pacing of this just started off so wrong, and we could never really get on track. And when much of the plot actually took off, instead of it being like this gripping, like fascinating experience, it felt like a horse stampede where everything was just like off balance and chaotic, and yeah, it just, so much of the series just did not work for me. Ironically though, I like Mark Lawrence as a writer, and I do feel like if I read something else from him, I would enjoy it. But I don't think that this is the series for me, nor do I think I should have started here. Not that I had expectations for anything. It's just, yeah, me and this book got off to a wrong foot, and I knew that, and we could just never figure out how to dance together. And so overall, like, I think I gave this book 3 stars, and I gave book 2 2 stars, and I haven't even tried to like rate to book 3, but I think overall this is like a 2-star series for me. Like, it's okay. Do I think that it's a necessary read by any means? No. And I would be very disappointed if this is the best that Mark Lawrence has put out, because it would feel like such a letdown. Like, I feel like he has the capacity and the bandwidth to give me so much more than what I got in Red Sister. I don't even know how to like give you a short synopsis, but I'm gonna try. We have Nona, who is this young girl that has so many mysteries around her, and she's always attracting enemies, and she's violent and vicious, and she is basically sentenced to death. But right before that happens, she's saved by this nun who worships the ancestor at this school, this like nunnery school, where they train women to serve the ancestors. You can serve the ancestor in a number of ways, one of which is to be like a spy for him, or an assassin, or to even just devote yourself to him and be wholly committed to like the scriptures and the believings of this ultimate religion. There is a prophecy within this world that everybody's misinterpreting, and so you're trying to figure out where Nona fits into that. Is she the chosen one? If she's the chosen one's protector? There's so much going on, and you're also trying to figure out if Nona is going to live up to that, if she even cares to fulfill the prophecy, because so much about this world feels like it's on the verge of collapse, and they are living on a place that has a dying sun. So there's so many other things going on, but it just takes forever for those to come to fruition. And so like a lot of what I just discussed is happening in the background for most of the story. And again, by the time you get it front and center, it's almost like well, it's time to go home now. Like, we had all day and you wasted our freaking time. And so, yeah, that was my experience reading Red Sister. But I will continue to read Mark Lawrence because I don't think that this is a depiction of his best work. So the next books were actually on my May TBR. The first is going to be Nevermore. This is a middle grade book where we're following Morgan Crow, which is a very, very interesting girl. I love this book. I didn't expect to, but it was so fun. So Morgan is cursed, and everyone blames her for everything bad that is happening in the community. Like, she even gets blamed if she looks at someone's wrong. And because of the day that she was born on, she is destined to die by her 11th birthday. And so we start the book with Morgan just trying to figure out like how she feels about that, because she's wondering like if anybody's even gonna miss her, because everyone sees her as this curse and as this problem. So she lives like a life of walking on eggshells. But on her 11th birthday, when she's supposed to die, she's actually not dead, and she's taken to like this magical place at the school where she has to compete to join in this special class of individuals. I'm trying not to like spoil the synopsis because I feel like if you know less, then you know more about the story, because it's more fun that way. But yeah, we're following Morgan on this journey as she lives life beyond the grave, learning more about herself, whether or not she is gifted, whether or not her gift was considered a curse, or maybe she was cursed and didn't know she had gifts. There's just so many questions about Morgan, but she is such a fun character, and I cannot wait to pick up book 2. So the second middle grade book that I read in May was The Book Wanderers, which is also another book that I gave 5 stars. The middle grades have just been hitting lately, so love that for me. We have Tilly, who is a young girl who's being raised by her grandparents, and they own a bookshop. And while she wonders what happened to her mom and her father and why she's been left in the care of her grandparents, she submerses a lot of what she feels into reading her favorite stories, until one day she discovers that she can actually roam the pages of her favorite stories, and that she has this secret ability that is actually not so secret, but is a magical ability and skill that is passed down through generations in her family. And there's so many rules to jumping into stories and how to interact with characters and what you can change and what you can't change. And we're following Tilly as she learns all those things, but while she's learning those things, she learns more secrets about her mother, and she becomes more curious about her mother's disappearance and her father's absence. And yeah, we just are following Tilly on that journey, and this was so much fun. I am someone who was very similar to Tilly when I was a kid, where I found complete solace within my favorite stories, and I wanted to reread them all the time. And it's just really, it harkens back to the younger version of yourself, where you can really see yourself in a story and see yourself like interacting with characters as if they're real people. It's been a while since I felt that, because now, like, I guess as a veteran reader, I can get immersed into a story, but somehow I still feel like a passenger. I feel like I'm in the story and I'm witnessing it, but I'm just watching. It was so much fun to watch Tilly actually jump into the story and interact with characters. And one thing that's supposed to be a big rule within this world, or just a deep understanding, is that when you leave a book and go back, none of the characters are supposed to ever remember you, because you're supposed to leave the story untouched. But Tilly discovers that when she goes back into these stories after leaving, characters very much do remember her. And I don't know if we're going to follow Tilly for every book, but I thought that this was so fun. It's definitely a book that like I want to sign and leave to my daughters, because it just seemed like the perfect book like for a family to gather around and read. So yeah. And then the last like 2 weeks of the month, I spent finishing the Age of Myth series, which is 6 books total. But I read 4 of the 6 books in the month of May, and I ended up finishing the series. Man, I have so many things to say about Michael J. Sullivan. He definitely outdid himself with this story. The latter 2 books I feel like were my least favorite of the entire like series. Not to say that they were bad, but I just found that like the first 4 were like top tier, and the last 2 felt like they had a little bit of pacing issues, and that we were kind of being driven into one too many circles. Like, I'm okay with us being like run around and we're trying to figure out the truth and we're trying to put all the pieces together, but I just feel like we ran the risk of like closing things and coming to a conclusion in a way that was almost anticlimactic. Luckily he saved it in the end there, but I was getting kind of nervous, like, okay, like I feel like we're wasting just a tad bit too much time. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna say unfortunately, I still personally love the Raya Revelations more. But I have to say that this is like a must read to truly understand Michael J. Sullivan's writing, the way his brain works, the way he sees his characters and sees the world. There was even this author's note in the back of his books. Like, first of all, he let his wife write afterwards, which I thought was wonderful. He really lets his fans into his wife's head and his head, and just, you feel like you're a part of this, like, Michael J. Sullivan family, and it's amazing to read and to see. But there was this afterward that I read where he said that his inspiration for this was looking at the ragtag group of friends from The Wizard of Oz. And it is such, like, it's such a subtle concept. It is so beneath the surface that if he had not said that, I would have never known that that is what he was pulling from. But in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God. All of these characters are throwaway characters that lack something that is deemed fundamental by society. And so for multiple reasons, they're not supposed to be the heroes of the story. They're supposed to be castaways and throwaways that no one pays attention to. And even still, you're supposed to be building faith into them because they're still on this journey of self-discovery, self-confidence, and they need things along the way in order to, like, fight this big battle. And that is the perfect way to describe what's happening within the story. There was an afterword after the last book where he said that, you know, he started with a central group of characters that were supposed to be the heroes, but they were so stereotypical, they were so on the nose, that he was just like, no, like, we need to switch it to the people behind the scenes and not the heroes of the story. And, you know, I just thought that that was like, wow, masterpiece. It was amazing to see. And now I'm wondering, like, what was his inspiration for so many other stories? But the characters in this book were utterly amazing, and I cannot wait to jump into the next series that he has. I'm gonna put off reading it for a while because he is releasing the third and final book in his third series, and I'm hoping that, like, the next one comes very soon after, because a world without anything to read from Michael J. Sullivan would really hurt me. And that pretty much sums up the books that I have read recently, and again, I feel pretty good. I don't know why filming wrap-ups feels like this mountain of things to do, but it's really not. It's really not. So let's hope that I can keep it going for next month. Thank you guys for making it to the end of my video. If you've made it here, leave me a little fairy, a little pixie emoji, and I will see you guys in my next one.